Support for The Common comes from the law firm of Davis Malm. Big or small, every case gets their full attention and most creative thinking. Their litigators are committed to resolving disputes in and out of the courtroom. Learn more at davismalm.com. Support for this podcast comes from MathWorks, a company accelerating the pace of engineering and science. Stick around until the end of this episode for a special segment about how companies like Nuvera Fuel Cells use MathWorks software to design engineered systems powering the clean energy transition.
WBUR Podcasts, Boston.
I'm Daryl C. Murphy, and you're listening to The Common. Boston Globe business reporter Diti Kohli, welcome back to The Common.
Thank you for having me, as always.
Oh, man, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. I want to ask you a question before we get started. Where do you shop for groceries?
I shop at Stop and Shop.
Do you?
In Revere, yeah.
Oh, man, we got to put a disclosure on this episode.
No, I am a fairly regular Stop and Shop stopper. I live in the part of East Boston but I have been on a kind of like Market Basket campaign recently. People are trying to get me on Market Basket.
Yo, can I tell you a secret? I have not been to Market Basket yet.
You can't say that too loudly.
Well, secret's out.
Secret's out, yeah.
Well, Diti, it's perfect that you shop at Stop and Shop because today we're going to be talking about the fact that Stop and Shop is closing more than 30 of its stores, including 8 in Massachusetts. But before we do that, we're talking about grocery stores. So just to set folks up, why did you feel like this is a story that people need to know about?
I mean, grocery stores are by no means the sexiest topic, but they are such an integral part of our lives.
People love their grocery stores.
People love their grocery stores. And it's not just where you're going, it's what you're walking away with. And if you feel like you need to revisit a place again, or if one grocery store is not fulfilling your needs and now you have to take another 3 hours out of your day to go somewhere else, like these are very real considerations for people's lives, especially as they're looking at their pocketbooks and their wallets a little bit more closely, as things get more expensive. We really need to be considering what our landscape in Massachusetts looks like and whether or not it's actually serving the people it's supposed to.
All right, got it. Now, back to Stop and Shop. Can you give us some background on Stop and Shop and its reputation here in Massachusetts?
I mean, Stop and Shop is a powerhouse Massachusetts brand. It was founded in Quincy. It's been known for a long time for being the leader in the grocery store landscape that we have, which includes, fairly unusually for the country, a ton of grocery stores. We have Market Baskets, we have Aldi's. People have a lot of options, but for a long time, Stop and Shop has been the New England grocery store. So they're sort of in a period of evolution now with these closures.
Talk to us about that evolution.
So they are saying that sort of the contraction that they're doing, closing some of these stores, is just natural for the time. Groceries have gotten more expensive. They're thinking about their bottom line a little bit more. And they're doing it in conjunction with a wide scale of renovations, not just here in Massachusetts, but sort of in their whole blueprint, which also includes Jersey, New York, a couple of other states in New England. And essentially they're saying that the value proposition that we give consumers, how much their groceries are, how enjoyable it is to walk around their grocery store, what prepared foods there are, all of that will be made better by just making some existing locations a little nicer to look at.
How much of that stuff matters, though?
They're hoping it matters a lot. And part of what I was trying to figure out is talking to grocery store consultants and shoppers about whether they truly think so. In some ways, the Allston store that they recently opened, like you mentioned, is a sign that they think that people will come for prepared foods. They will come for multicultural groceries that maybe they can't get in other places. But some folks I talked about were like, this is sort of the beginning of the quote-unquote death spiral that grocery stores go through, where they're shrinking their footprint, which sometimes means they have to increase their prices. They just sort of can't get out of the train of, okay, we're getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Okay, you said death spiral. We gotta talk about that. What is the lay of the land right now for the grocery store industry?
It's in a time of flux. I mean, as you know, early in the pandemic, all of us were at the grocery store all the time. You know, their sales exploded. Their revenues exploded. Everyone was buying toilet paper. We know this. And then we went through a period of evolution during the pandemic where groceries just cost so much more. You know, inflation was really high. So even if sales were high, stores were paying more for their ingredients, paying more for their labor. And the budgetary calculations got really hard to keep up with. And now all of them are sort of trying to figure out, okay, what's next? And Stop and Shop they've put out a bunch of promotional deals, 99-cent deals, like day lock prices. They're hawking their coupons. They're putting these like savings kiosks in the stores. And they're hoping that that'll be enough to convince people that this is still an affordable place for them to do not just their like $35 little like Lay's chip run, but their actual like $200 weekly rice, eggs, milk grocery run.
But are any of these places where Stop and Shop is closing, is that creating an access issue for the communities there?
What Stop and Shop is saying is that the majority of actually all 32 locations that they're closing are within 5 miles of another Stop and Shop store.
Okay.
So they're hoping that at least personally they are not creating food deserts. We know that 5 miles can still be hard for people to get to if the next Stop and Shop store is the closest. But they're really dedicated to not like increasing the problem of food insecurity. But, you know, naturally, as grocery stores close, there's some of that you can't control.
But does the result of this lead to Stop and Shop locations being near or in more wealthier areas?
The stores that they chose to close are underperforming, quote unquote. And that doesn't always translate to in a poorer area. I think as it has in the past. I mean, Stop and Shop often talks about their Grove Hall store, you know, on the line between Roxbury and Dorchester. That was a store that was, quote unquote, underperforming for a really long time. They had a lot of issues. And when they went in and renovated it and reworked it and honestly added a lot of food access resources a couple years ago, it's dramatically changed the way it serves that community. I haven't spoken to people who are shopping there specifically in recent months, but the numbers are totally different. Their sales are up there. And they're trying to do it in a way that is like, okay, what do the people of Roxbury actually want on their food aisles? What sort of things are we running out of? And I think if they take that perspective going forward, the consultants and economists that I talk to are like, that will work. You just have to decide where you're going to invest in because you can't invest everywhere.
Right.
There's only so much money, right?
Have you heard from community members about any of these closures?
I spoke to a couple of people who are Stop and Shop regulars. People have a lot of opinions.
I bet.
On their grocery store. But I think more than food access, the complaint that I heard is that a lot of people had hesitations about Stop and Shop already. They were seeing greater value for their money, greater accessibility, greater range of products, you know, the market basket down the street. And so in some ways, they're dealing with a perception issue among people who have been New Englanders for a really long time or their whole life, where they have to convince people quickly enough that they're changing enough that this is still a grocery store worth going to. And more people are not finding that to be the case. Yeah.
How are they thinking about the competition? Because, you have Market Basket, you got Trader Joe's and Whole Foods. And, you know, I mean, I know Whole Foods they have their own pricing issues and whatnot. But you have other grocery stores who might be offering a better deal, you know?
Exactly. I think what I've always heard is that Stop and Shop is a really traditional grocery store. The way it's set up, the way they price their items. And Aldi, Whole Foods, Trader Joe's, like you mentioned, companies that are backed by a lot of sometimes private equity, corporate money, they aren't playing by the same rule book. They can price differently, they advertise differently, and they're just running with different kind of money on the background. And so what Stop and Shop is going against is a business model that is totally different than theirs, while people are also like going to Trader Joe's for frozen foods that they like that maybe aren't available at Stop and Shop.
I do wonder, with these closures in Massachusetts, is that an opportunity for local, smaller businesses?
That's a really good question. I think that we've seen some success with that. I mean, the Dorchester Food Co-op opened fairly recently. I think that there's a lot of discussion among City Hall and community members about making sure that our food deserts don't expand, often as our pharmacy deserts are, and, other necessities in the community. But it's a matter of where that money comes from. We also know that smaller stores tend to not have as healthy groceries or, a wide range of produce and meats that people really need. And that's partly because sourcing that stuff and keeping it in a fridge is pricey. So I think there's a willingness in the community to do that, but I haven't seen it translate into actually expanding small businesses yet. That doesn't mean it won't happen.
And you mentioned City Hall. So I got to ask you, how are local officials responding to this? I want to hear more about that.
I think that, the conversation more around grocery stores that I've heard is like what you're saying about food access. People are really concerned about making sure the closures don't affect the community. But that has not really been the regular line of thinking with Stop and Shop specifically, because they're such a behemoth and because they will still have so many stores here.
Diti, before we go, I want to look forward. I want to look to the future. What are you watching out for in this landscape of grocery stores and grocery shopping?
I mean, we saw grocery delivery explode during the pandemic. I personally have relied on Instacart probably more times than I should have because people were finding it to be an efficient and in some ways safe process during the pandemic. It's a question now of whether that's going to last forever and also the impact that that'll have on grocery stores, because these are apps that are sending drivers still to these stores to pick stuff up. But how does the math work on the back end? Stop and Shop has a partnership with DoorDash, so you can still get Stop and Shop groceries at home, but they're starting to change the equation of where the money that we spend on food is going. And I think I'll be keeping a close eye on that.
Well, with that, Diti, thank you so much for this story and coming through to The Common to talk to us about it.
Thank you.
Next up, I bring you some of my conversation that I had with chef and TikTok star John Kung at WBUR's City Space. We'll be right back.
Support for this podcast comes from MathWorks, the leading developer of mathematical computing software that accelerates innovation by allowing companies to test technology virtually.
They're able to understand how that system's going to work before they start to begin building hardware systems.
Stick around until the end of this episode for a special segment about how model-based design is helping engineers, scientists, and academics solve today's energy challenges.
I'm Meghna Chakrabarty, host of On Point. At a time when the world is more complex than ever, On Point's daily deep dive conversation takes the time to make the world more intelligible. From the state of democracy to how artificial intelligence is transforming the way we live and work to the wonders of the natural world. One topic each day, one rich and nuanced exploration. That's On Point from WBUR. Be sure to follow us right here in your podcast feed.
And we're back. If you're into cooking and you're on TikTok, you've probably heard of John Kung. They're a Detroit-based chef and food influencer whose work centers third culture cooking. He came through to WBUR's City Space for its curated cuisine series, and we talked about a few things, including his cookbook, how he handles being a heartthrob, and how being queer has helped them in the kitchen. Enjoy. You are a self-described third culture chef. And I feel like it's not, reading it as a Black person, I can identify with it somehow because to me, it reads as there's a culture of folks who have their past, their history, but they're in a position where they can create their own identity. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you posted this video, and I want us to watch it and let's talk about it.
Oh, okay. There are many ways to identify as a person of third culture, but most of the time, the culture of your home is different than the culture of the country that you live in. Maybe you're in Utah and your parents are from Pakistan, or maybe you're in Dallas and your parents are from Nigeria. Basically, you cross a cultural divide every day just by walking through the doors of your home. With that might come some challenges like the culture shock you faced as a kid, or you lack a true sense of belonging. Maybe your aunties will say you're too westernized while a stranger on the street will look at you like a foreigner. And those challenges are unique to a lot of people regardless of the ethnicity and the culture that they come from. But I'm here to tell you that it can be a creative superpower too. What you have is...
I love that. That's
Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you.
I mean, tell us more about that. How are you thinking about third culture these days?
I came into like cooking in this way because I had actually gone back to China to like study noodle making, and I had realized that my understanding of Chinese food that I taught myself how to do here was so different than what it was over there. And I had a creative identity crisis as to like, well, if what I haven't been making is not like Chinese food, well, then what is it? And then I realized that I was taking ingredients and techniques from like my neighbors out in Michigan. And so what is it really? And I found that, you know, third culture was just a label that I just really resonated with. But you can call it like diasporic cooking or however it is. It is of the same feeling. And I do find it's what ties a lot of us together in that way, regardless, again, of your culture and ethnicity. We have the same humor. We have the same experiences for the most part. And in that way, our creative output tends to be spiritually the same.
Mm-hmm. Do you see the internet helping to push that forward for people?
Yeah, for sure. I had known, luckily enough, I had finished high school in Hong Kong. So third culture was a term that we were all very familiar with, like early on. I'd mentioned it very, very casually in one of my videos. And so many people who like grew up with that feeling all their lives was like, I didn't even know there was something like, there was like a word or a phrase that described the person I was. And I was like, yeah, we out here.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Absolutely. You're in great shape.
Thank you.
How do you balance cooking this good food, staying in shape? Because, you know, I go to your page and I'm like, I don't know if I want to eat more or if I need to get in the gym. I don't know what I need to do.
Yeah. One of my main things that I've been working on, like since post-book, was actually kind of showing people that there is room in their like fitness journeys or nutrition goals for their cultural foods. Yeah, it has been something that I've been working on. Like my focus mainly has been to like kind of de-villainize the ingredient, especially on places like TikTok and in short form media. You have people telling you like such and such sugar is bad, carbs are bad, seed oils are bad, and like you should never be consuming any of these things. And I've always been of the belief that anybody who tells you the word never is probably like just trying to sell you something else. Like I went on a run yesterday and like I felt like awful, but I knew that I had to get it done. And I felt like I had 3 miles in me, no more than that. Maybe it was going to be a run walk. And I just happened to stop by a kiosk that took Apple Pay. So I paid with my watch. And I literally just drank like a wild cherry Pepsi and just like downed that thing. And that 3-mile run was all of a sudden 8.7.
Nice.
And like I did it, I did the math. It was like 125 calories. It's like pure sugar and stuff like that. But it was exactly what I needed at the time.
Right.
And people would be so quick to tell you, it was like, oh, that stuff is poison. That's gonna kill you. It was like, no, it's literally what I needed. So I'm trying to do something that is in my content that is more focused on that, where it's like understanding what you need and just using that to work towards your goals.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And I also got to address the elephant in the room. We are all thinking it.
Yeah.
You are an incredibly handsome dude.
Oh, thank you.
Okay. How do you balance that? I mean, are there ever moments where you have to remind people like, I can cook too.
Right. It's interesting, like being a person on the internet, because like during the pandemic when I started TikTok and stuff, TikTok seemed like such a small little space. And the people, like I recognized the people in the comments, and it seemed like a little community. So it was like, whatever, I would film like a shirtless video or whatnot, not really thinking of the consequences of that. And then like, that's kind of what you get known for. And it was really interesting. There was like an article, I think, that was released last year talking about like the thirst trappy chefs of TikTok. And they called me the most subdued one, which is great because I love being the classiest person in the room. But, it's still whatever it is that gets people's attention. I understand that. I did at one point in time, I think last year, was just like, can't they just see me as an artist? And now I'm at the point where it's like, well, if you're not gonna respect me as an artist, then just buy my merch.
I think I heard one interview where you said the gym membership is now paid for by the business card.
Yes, it is. It is
Respect.
A tax deductible expense. It is definitely part of my. It's part of my work now, and I think like that to a certain degree has been beneficial because like I kind of now see going to the gym as work. So now I'm a lot more regimented and a lot more inspired to go, where it's like, all right, this is part of the job. And also I get to eat more when I'm done. So
boom. Okay, so here I want to share the part of the event where John and I discussed their cookbook, Kung Fu, which is an exploration of John's third culture cooking. We kicked it off by playing for the audience a video I made with City Space Assistant Director Candace Springer, whom some of you know, where we try out recipes for the book.
We're making a smashed cucumber salad. Ooh!
Lumpia or lumpia?
Lumpia.
With the avocado sauce.
Dim sims with lobster.
You can see the video on our Instagram at WBUR The Comment. Okay, on with the show. What is it like to put together a cookbook? What was that like for you? How were you thinking through recipes? How were you choosing which recipes to share?
luckily for me, like I had been in the industry for probably close to 12 years at that point. I had a small private kitchen in Detroit where literally every month I was just coming up with a new menu, completely new, just based off of seasons and stuff, like blah, 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 chef, all of that stuff. But it kind of made writing the book, that part of writing the book was quite easy, I found, especially like just revolving around a theme where I was looking not only like showcasing my own like diasporic cooking or third culture cooking, but showing examples of like diasporic cooking as it had spread across the world from the basis of China. So you had things like lumpia, Shanghai, dim sims from Australia, Thunder Bay bonbons, like which are fried ribs from Toronto, just following like migration patterns and just like showing off like all of these things that we have like in common, and then just putting some kind of like twist on that, inserting like my own experiences into it. That part of it was so much fun and so creatively fulfilling.
Audience question: how do you feel your existence as a queer person has affected your experience in the food world and your food?
I was very fortunate enough to have been in like early on, like when I was like 19, my friend group just happened to be comprised mostly of older Detroit drag queens who taught me so much about being creative and queer. And I think queerness and our access to like expressing ourselves fearlessly, once we finally like are not afraid to express ourselves anymore, I do believe that that freedom allows us to have a creative output that is at an elevated level it is a level that is accessible to everyone. But when you have been so suppressed and so afraid for so long in your life, and then finally you're able to just like let it all out, I think that does make you a little bit more fearless as a creative person in general. So if you have that to tap into, you're just willing to take risks, and you're willing to like not have certain boundaries imposed on you. And that is totally reflective on like the things that I make. I can't point to exactly what it is that I make, but like, you know, just starting off at that point, I think it is an advantage that we have. And it is like kind of like a gift that we are given.
John, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Give it up for John Kung. And that is our show for today. Thank you so much for listening to The Common. If you like what you're hearing, head on over to wherever you listen to podcasts, Spotify, Apple, whatever it may be. Leave us a review. Let us know what you're thinking about the show. And if you want to get in touch with us, hit us up on Instagram at WBURTheCommon. You can also send us an email at thecommon@wbur.org. And now it is that time for me to let you know that The Common is produced by Franny Monahan. It's mixed by Emily Jankowski and Paul Vaitkus, and it's edited by Samatha Joshi and Ben Brock Johnson. And our theme music is Me by Hisu. And from the newsroom of WBUR, I'm your host, Daryl C. Murphy. I'll talk to you next Thursday.
Support for this podcast comes from MathWorks, accelerating the pace of discovery, innovation, development, and learning in engineering and science. Listen on for a story of how one company is using MathWorks software to help the planet.
The transportation sector is one of the largest contributors of greenhouse gases, and a lot of that is from maritime transport.
Yeah, maritime transport creates a huge amount of carbon dioxide, about 900 million tons annually.
That's Gus Block, Corporate Development Director at Nuvera Fuel Cells, who explains that 90% of all foreign goods are transported through ports and container ships, most of which run on diesel. But Nuvera is working on a way to electrify this system through hydrogen fuel cells.
Hydrogen can make all the difference between being able to electrify those vessels or not.
Cargo ships often travel far distances.
Well, sometimes they're crossing oceans, right?
And hydrogen, the lightest element on the periodic table, is uniquely suited to help power the ship's long journeys.
Fuel cells can take advantage of hydrogen's properties, being something that is quickly refueled, something you can carry on board a vehicle, and be used in places where battery electrification is impractical for one reason or another.
One reason, batteries can be really heavy. Another, batteries can take a long time to charge.
That may be possible for hovercraft or for ferries, for instance, but for long-haul shipping, it's quite a different story. And what hydrogen gets you is the ability to carry much more energy on board than you would otherwise with batteries.
And in addition to powering cargo ships, hydrogen fuel cell technology can be used to power electric trucks, heavy equipment, and also passenger cars. So, how do hydrogen fuel cells work?
A fuel cell is an electrochemical device. Each individual cell in the stack consists of a membrane that separates hydrogen on one side and air on the other.
And, as Nuvera Chief Engineer Pierre-François Kay explains, the hydrogen arrives at the membrane, breaks down into protons and electrons, generating power for a motor, all without the need to burn fossil fuels. In fact, they produce no exhaust other than heat and water. But implementation of this technology is no easy feat, with several challenges to overcome.
One of our main challenges that we face is hydration management.
The membrane needs to be hydrated to be permeable to protons, But too much water can cause flooding, and the fuel cell will not operate properly.
So with model-based design using MATLAB and Simulink, we created a model of the fuel cell, and that allowed us to simulate our water management controls in a variety of ambient conditions.
Model-based design. I needed to check with someone from MathWorks, the creator of MATLAB and Simulink, to fully understand what's happening.
Well, companies like Nuvera, who are using MATLAB and Simulink, are using it to model and simulate a complex engineered system. For Nuvera, it's a chemical reaction involving hydrogen as a fuel, which then is combined with air to form an electric current and water.
That's Tony Lennon, the Simscape marketing manager at MathWorks, who explains that model-based design allows Nuvera to virtually simulate how the hydrogen fuel cell will operate in real time and to tackle challenges like hydration management virtually before using physical components.
Not using model-based design means that you're going to be out there testing on real hardware. You run the risk of damaging hardware or not thoroughly testing all the operating envelope that the real equipment's going to see.
And operating real hardware can take a lot of time. Pierre-Francois K again.
There's a huge advantage to simulate all of these conditions in a virtual environment instead of building systems physically, because those are expensive, and every time we need to change a piece of hardware, it takes time.
Saving this time can mean more innovation and, in the case of Nuvera, more fuel cells to power the clean energy transition.
To learn more about MathWorks and Nuvera, and for more stories, check out wbur.org/mathworks.